why is it important? And what does it do for our culture and our society?
Well, there are many reasons that it's important, and holding afflicting people in power and the comfortable, holding them in check, providing a window into how government works and how institutions work or don't work, but also just to illuminate things for people that are who are too busy to try to figure out things for themselves. They've got kids to raise, they've got jobs to go to, and so I see our job, and I always have, but even more so with what we're doing now, and we have a different kind of mission than a regular newspaper in some ways, is to go in depth and to help people understand some of the complicated issues that are out there and affecting their lives, whether they're environmental issues or political issues or issues like immigration or energy and things that they really need to understand to be productive citizens and to frankly help elect the best people, even though that isn't always going to happen. So it has been very distressing throughout my entire career, Jake, especially when I started covering politics in 1986, when, believe me, the internet didn't exist and covering things was a lot different then. And getting a story out fast meant getting it out the next day, not in the next 30 minutes or 15 minutes, which is what it means now. Totally different world. But what has been distressing is that as we have evolved from just a print environment and TV news into this multifarious ways that you can get information just from your phone, by the way. And by the way, I should just say real quickly, if I forget to say it later, half of our readers come in through mobile devices. So it really is, and it's a big deal. A lot of them are young people, as you know, and I consider you young, by the way, Jake, based on where you said what years you went to school. So the bottom line is, it's been very distressing, to get back to my point, to watch the slow diminishment in the public's eyes of what we do, meaning journalists. When I grew up, I grew up at the end of the time of a guy named Walter Cronkite, who was the most respected man in America when he read the news. And most network anchors were revered, now not so much. And where people believed what they read in the New York Times or heard on the NBC nightly news, they believed it. And there was reason to believe it too. I think there still is, but with the proliferation of people calling themselves journalists, with the proliferation of social media, where misinformation or disinformation can be pushed into the mainstream, and where scandals or many scandals have tarnished the media and we get painted with a broad brush, it's been very, very difficult to do our jobs, or more difficult to do our jobs. One of the reasons I started The Independent was for this reason. The time, I don't like this phrase that much either, but it was a perfect storm in the sense that Sheldon Adelson, who was the biggest Republican donor in the world, had just purchased the largest newspaper in the state, the Review Journal. The Las Vegas Sun, which was a competitor in name only, was running out of resources, wasn't doing that much. And you had a candidate running for president, and this is not a partisan comment at all, but who was trying to delegitimize the media, the mainstream media, taking advantage of decades of a worsening impression of the media by the American public. And I said to myself, there has got to be a segment of people out there who are yearning for something transparent, deep, down the middle, a place where they can go, and after they click off of it, say, I trust the indie, I trust the information that I find there. And I think that is what we've achieved to a great extent. There's always going to be naysayers. Not every story is perfect. We make mistakes because we're human beings. But I think that my faith has been borne out, that there is a yearning out there for an antidote to some of what's out there, some of the noise, the disinformation, the partisan news sites, both sides. And that is why I think, to the degree that we've been successful, and by the way, I judge success in the number of days that we've been alive, and we're still alive, as I said, 3.5 years later, and still going strong. I think we've been successful in doing that and creating that brand.
I think you're right, and I think from a psychological perspective, people just get worn out of the hyperbole. Our brains aren't built to receive that level of excitement and surprise and fear all the time, right? And I don't know if it started with the emergence of the 24-hour news cycle, or every time you turn on the TV, there's a ticker now with more information than just the information being presented. But certainly it's starting to have a wearing effect on folks. And I got to believe that we're just overloaded, and rather than more disparate information sources, it would be nice if we could pare that down and have a few really reliable ones, one of which is your organization. Help us understand how people can sift through the noise and discern the signal within the noise, when you've got people, like you said, calling themselves journalists, but really they're just people writing a blog, or people who are journalists, but they're so strongly opinionated that we can't separate like opinion from news anymore. And then talk a little bit, if you would, about codes of ethics, because when we're educated in this profession, there is a code of ethics, and there's a style guide that other people may not necessarily adhere to. And that's the same as in the counseling profession too. Lots of people out there doing it the right way, and they don't have to have a license to do it. As long as they're doing it, the right way, people get helped. How do we help the public figure this out?
It's a really tough question, Jake, and there is so much noise out there that it's tough to find the signal in the noise. And I've given a lot of speeches about this over the years, and people ask questions like that. Where do I go? What do you read, Jon, that you trust? And I can name places, but that's not really going to be helpful. What would be helpful is if people were more discerning. The real problem that I think has developed in this country over the last decade or so, maybe even a little longer, is what I call the validation culture. And that is that people are watching or listening or consuming sources that only confirm what they already think to be true, as opposed to augmenting their information base with more, or looking at things from a different perspective. Liberals watch MSNBC and throw confetti in the living room. Conservatives do the same when they watch Fox, and CNN has gone back and forth trying to be the best of both worlds, and often gotten paralyzed. And I know great journalists at all those organizations, by the way, but that's not the issue. The issue is that people have lost the desire, and I shouldn't say all people, but too many people have lost the desire to learn, to get more information, to have a broader perspective of the world. Even if it's a narrow world like their city or their state, it's very difficult to get people to pay attention when they think everything is, and I don't even say the word because it bothers me so much, FAKE news. It's terrible. It's terrible. And Trump knew exactly what he was doing, and he was, in a way, brilliant at doing it. And so you just have to keep trying and doing all the things that we try to do at the Indy. We disclose things. When we make mistakes, we correct them immediately and make sure that we have a note at the bottom saying what was corrected and when, and if necessary, how the mistake was made. You have to do that. Too often in our business, news organizations have talked down to their readers or viewers, and essentially said, "Hey, we're protected by the First Amendment. We have a noble job to do. Don't get in our way. Don't complain." And I think that kind of arrogance has really hurt journalism too. And then you have the outside, the external critics who have exploited every mistake that is made to try to, as I said earlier, paint all of us with a broad brush. I don't know what to do except to make sure that my reporters have a grounding sense of ethics and rectitude, and they are amazing. I just thought of this term as we're sitting here. You've heard of rhinos being Republican in name. I'm a bino. I'm a boss in name only. These reporters run me. If they think that we're going in the wrong direction, they speak up, and it's been incredibly collaborative. And we talk about ethical issues. And I do something that I don't know many editors in the country, if any, do. When we decide to report on a controversial story, I will often write a blog post explaining our thought process behind it. Again, it's just giving them a window into our thinking. And I've done that many times over the years. I have a blog on the site for those of your listeners who don't know. It's called Ralston Reports. And many of those posts are about why and how we covered a story. I did one just this weekend about why we covered the arrest of a couple of reporters during some protests over the weekend. I have wanted this to some extent to be a conversation with people in Nevada about Nevada. That was a little bit too Pollyannish. If you look at almost any comment section of any news organization, it can become a sewer. We have gone back and forth on rules there too. I'm sorry if I'm going on too long about this, but I'm just going through some of the thought processes that we've gone through as an organization. And eventually we just have essentially let most things go except for profanity and certain maybe potentially libelous attacks. But we have tried to elevate the discussion. And I think to some extent we have. And you mentioned our op-ed page. One thing I decided to do at the beginning, which I think has hurt the credibility of many news organizations that do this, is endorsing candidates and writing editorials and taking very strong positions. Again, that I think has contributed to what people see as the arrogance of newspapers. I'm not denigrating newspapers that do editorials or endorsements. I'm telling you that what I decided is we are going to be down the middle on everything. We're going to provide as much information as possible for people to make their own decisions. But we're not going to tell them what to do. On the other hand, I wanted to have as robust an op-ed page as possible, a cauldron of ideas of all sides swirling around all the time. And I think we've achieved that too. I started with 3 columnists. One was pretty liberal, the other was pretty conservative, and the other who was a libertarian. And so, and we have invited people to write op-eds, and we've gotten some incredibly wise and smart and deeply thought out pieces, and been responses to those pieces. I think that helps people. They see different points of view. They can judge for themselves. So we're learning all the time still. I mean, it is great. I don't mind saying I'm 60 years old. Jake, I'm going to be 61 soon. And I'm still learning on what the best ways to do this are. And I learn from my reporters almost every day, and from readers too, who give us good suggestions on how to do this. And so for a guy who likes to talk a lot, I think I've become a pretty good listener during this period of my career to criticisms and when they're constructive, right? And especially internally, it really is a collaborative effort when we do anything major. And I just, again, the talent that these reporters have that I have hired, and their passion for doing what we're doing and doing it right. I shouldn't say this probably, but I will. I am thrilled that they are having such a good time and they're enjoying what they're doing, that no one has left in 3.5 years. And believe me, some of these reporters, or most of them, are talented enough to work for major national news organizations. And maybe some of them will, and I would wish them well if they do. But they've stayed because they believe in the mission of the Indy.
I think there's 3 real takeaways there. That very nice soliloquy, and I know you want to apologize for talking too much, but that's why I had you on. I want you to talk. People hear me every time we do one of these things, so I'm going to let my guests ramble. But for me, what I heard there, 3 major themes. One is you love breaking through orthodoxy and doing things your way, as long as it's the right way, right? There's some fundamental principles that you're not going to breach, and I appreciate that. And, not endorsing candidates. Instead, you're going to pull a bunch of information about all candidates. And I saw that really, really impressive, comprehensive judicial candidates review